Welcome to this deep dive. When we were putting this together, we were thinking specifically about you.
Yeah, exactly.
We know exactly why you tune in. You are someone you're incredibly busy. You're navigating this highly complex life, but you still crave that deep foundational knowledge. You want to understand the hidden architecture of the ideas that really shape our world.
Right, but what you absolutely do not want,
Oh, for sure.
and frankly, what none of us have time for, is that overwhelming fatigue of information overload.
Yeah.
You don't need another textbook.
Yeah.
And you definitely don't need some, surface-level summary. You want the core insights.
The real substance.
Exactly. Delivered in a way that actually respects your intelligence and your schedule.
And today we have a mission that is going to take a concept you have likely accepted your entire life without a second thought, and we are going to completely upend it.
It's going to be a big one.
We're unpacking this fascinating stack of theological reflections, deep cultural observations, and historical frameworks to fundamentally deconstruct the idea of priorities.
It really is one of those concepts that is so deeply ingrained in our modern culture, and especially in modern faith communities.
Oh, absolutely.
Questioning, it almost feels like you were breaking a fundamental rule of adulthood, right?
Like it's illegal to even bring it up.
Yeah. I mean, from the time we're in elementary school, we are taught to organize our lives into lists. We're trained to rank our goals, to rank our relationships, our values. Productivity culture just demands it.
It thrives on it.
It does. But the material we are diving into today suggests that this very system, this deeply ingrained habit of making lists, it hides some severe logical and theological flaws.
Huge flaws.
Flaws that are actually causing a tremendous amount of unseen stress.
I think the best way to get into this is to look at a perfectly encapsulated real-world example. There's this viral social media relationship reel that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about here. If you spend any time scrolling on your phone, you've probably seen a variation of this.
Oh, I know exactly the one you're talking about.
Right. So picture the setup. You're watching this video, and it's a classic, slightly comedic interaction between a boyfriend and a girlfriend. The lighting's casual, they're just sitting in their living room, and the woman looks over at her boyfriend and asks this incredibly loaded question. She says, am I number one in your heart?
And the boyfriend.
Oh, you can see it on his face.
Yeah. He thinks he is being tossed the easiest softball question in the history of the world.
Exactly. He leans back thinking he is absolutely nailing the answer, and he confidently replies, of course you're number one. You are my top priority.
He's practically mentally patting himself on the back right there.
Totally. He thinks he just won the argument. He thinks he's being incredibly romantic.
But he's completely missing the point.
True.
And what happens next is just brilliant. Because instead of swooning, instead of being, flattered by this grand romantic declaration,
She springs the trap.
she springs this brilliant, albeit entirely unromantic logical trap. She doesn't miss a single beat. She immediately shoots back, oh, so who is number two?
And who's number three?
And who are 4 and 5? Why didn't you say, I am the only one?
It's so good.
What is so absolutely fascinating about this interaction is the surgical precision of her logic.
Yeah.
She understands something fundamental about language that he completely missed. The language of being number one is, at its core, the language of ranking.
Exactly. It's the language of a competition.
Precisely. By definition, if you use an ordinal number, first, second, third,
You're implying a list.
you are inherently implying that there are other items, other options, existing in the exact same category. They're just sitting slightly lower on the ladder.
Right.
She wasn't looking to be given a high ranking in a crowded field.
No.
She was looking for total exclusivity. She wanted to be the only one in that specific category, not just the winner of a daily competition among other potential romantic interests.
When you break it down like that, it makes total sense. I mean, if someone says, this is my number one favorite pizza place, you immediately know they have a second and third favorite pizza place because they're all pizza places. They all exist on the exact same playing field.
Right.
So here is where we have to make a massive philosophical pivot. Here's the big question, the core conflict that we're really diving into today. Are we doing this exact same thing to God?
Oof. Yeah.
Because if you think about it, in modern culture, in self-help seminars, in productivity books,
Everywhere.
and certainly in faith communities everywhere, you are constantly, relentlessly told to put God first.
It's on bumper stickers.
It's in social media bios. You are told to make God number one on your priority ladder. The classic formula we all hear is usually some variation of God is first, family is second, work is third, hobbies are fourth, and so on. And if you just hear that in passing, it sounds great, right?
It sounds perfect.
It sounds like a pious, noble, perfectly balanced way to organize a really chaotic human life.
It does sound incredibly noble. It sounds like the right answer. Just like the boyfriend in the video, we think we're giving the right, respectful answer.
Yeah.
But the arguments we're unpacking today reveal that this is actually a profound trap.
A huge trap.
That seemingly pious starting point hides massive foundational flaws. Because while telling you to put God first sounds like a wonderful way to honor the divine, what it actually does in practice is create a competitive framework.
Right.
And that framework completely undermines the very nature of who God is claimed to be in historical theology.
Because of the list.
Exactly. Think about the logic we just discussed.
Yeah.
If God is simply the first priority on your list, he is still fundamentally just an item on a list.
And this is where it really clicks. When we place God at number one, we don't realize what we are actually doing. We think we're elevating him, but logically, we are inadvertently dragging the creator of the universe down onto the exact same playing field as our career, as our bank accounts, our gym schedule, and our extended family. We are taking the ultimate reality and tossing him into a race with a bunch of mundane daily tasks.
That is exactly the danger. You are making God merely the best option among many, rather than the only one in his category. It turns the creator into a contestant. And what is he competing against? He's competing against the very things he supposedly created us to care for. Wow. It pits God against your spouse, your children, your vocation. If we look at how this connects to historical texts, we can see how badly modern culture has misinterpreted things.
Okay.
Let's take the first commandment from the book of Exodus,
Okay, yeah.
which is obviously foundational to Western religious thought. You shall have no other gods before me.
Oh, this is a perfect example, because a modern reader who is just steeped in corporate productivity and to-do lists,
Right.
they read that and immediately filter it through the lens of priority. We read no other gods before me, and we think it means make sure I am at the very top of your list, make sure I am the CEO of your personal pantheon.
Exactly. We project our modern corporate structures onto ancient texts. But historical theology in ancient Near Eastern contexts tell us something entirely different.
Right.
In the ancient world, people had pantheons, literal lists of gods. A god for the harvest, a god for the river, a god for war. When this text was written, the command wasn't God asking for the top spot on that existing list. It was a radical command to completely clear the board.
Throw the list away.
Yes, it was a command to remove all other contenders from the category entirely. It is the language of covenantal exclusivity. It's saying, I am not on the list. I am the only one. It is absolutely not a competitive ranking.
That distinction is huge. It's the difference between I am the best option and I am the only reality.
Precisely.
But let's bring this down to earth for a second. If I'm listening to this and I'm trying to figure out how to manage my incredibly stressful life, what is the practical difference here?
Yeah.
What's the actual day-to-day difference between treating God as a priority versus treating him with what the theological frameworks call lordship? How does that change the way I operate on a random, chaotic Tuesday morning?
That is the core of the issue. It essentially comes down to the deep philosophical difference between authority and choice. Let's look at what a priority actually is.
Okay.
By definition, a priority is a human choice.
Yeah.
It is a shifting subjective decision based on your limited resources.
Right.
You wake up on a Tuesday and you decide, based on your deadlines, today my top priority is finishing this massive project at work.
Right.
Or maybe on a Saturday you decide, today my top priority is being completely present with my kids. Priorities are fluid. They shift based on your physical energy, your schedule, the demands of your boss, and even your mood.
Let me jump in here with a quick historical fact that I think adds a lot of color to this.
Please do.
I was reading up on the etymology of the word priority. For hundreds of years, the word priority was strictly singular.
Really?
Yes, it just meant the very first or prior thing. It was literally impossible to have priorities, plural.
That makes so much sense.
Right. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution, when we started trying to optimize human beings like factory machines, that we pluralized the word. We created this idea that you could have multiple competing number ones depending on the hour of the day.
That is a brilliant point, and it perfectly illustrates how modern and artificial this list-making anxiety really is.
Yeah.
We took a concept of absolute singularity and fractured it into a dozen competing demands. Now, contrast that fractured industrial idea of priorities with the theological concept of lordship.
Okay.
While a priority is a subjective human choice, lordship is presented as an objective reality. It is the fundamental, unchanging truth that God is the sovereign owner of all things. That remains true, regardless of what you personally choose to focus on during any given hour. To put it simply, you don't choose to make the Creator the top rung of your ladder. He owns the ladder itself.
Wow.
He owns the wood the ladder is made of. The entire framework changes from what do I prioritize today to how do I live under this overarching reality?
And this leads us directly into what I think is the most damaging part of the ladder system. Because we have internalized this industrial idea of plural priorities, and because we treat our lives like this rigid ladder, we end up trapping ourselves in what economists call a zero-sum game.
Right. The zero-sum game.
If you aren't familiar with the term, a zero-sum game is a situation where one person's gain is strictly balanced by another person's loss. If I win $1, you have to lose $1. The pie is only so big. And under the priority model, we treat our human life, our time, and our emotional energy as strictly limited resources in a zero-sum game. There are only 24 hours in a day. You only have so much bandwidth. And if you are living by the ranking model, every single hour of your day becomes a cutthroat battleground.
And we really cannot understate the devastating psychological toll that battleground takes on a person.
It's massive.
It creates a vicious, unending guilt cycle, particularly for anyone trying to take their faith seriously. Think about the basic mechanics of how this plays out in real time.
That's right.
Let's say you've accepted the standard formula. God is the top rung of your priority ladder, work is the second rung, and family is the third rung.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you're a professional trying to build a career. What happens when you pour 50 or 60 hours a week into a highly demanding tech job?
Yeah.
Or, on the flip side, what happens when you decide to spend your entire Saturday completely unplugged, just relaxing on the couch with your spouse and kids?
I know exactly what happens because I think everyone listening to this has felt it.
Oh, absolutely.
Under that ranking model, giving that massive necessary amount of time to the second or third rung on your list feels like an act of theft.
Yes.
It feels like you are actively stealing time away from your supposedly number one priority.
Exactly. It frames your entirely normal, necessary human activities as a betrayal of your highest value.
And it creates this constant, exhausting internal friction. If you're listening right now, I guarantee you have felt this specific flavor of burnout. You feel utterly drained trying to balance these competing demands. You are trying to be an incredibly competent employee. You want to be a present and loving partner. You want to be a reliable friend, and you want to be a faithful spiritual person.
Right.
But because you have placed all of these things on the exact same competing list, giving your focus to one inherently means taking focus away from another.
It has to, mathematically.
Right. So you end up living with this perpetual low-level hum of guilt. You sit in a work meeting feeling guilty that you haven't prayed enough. You sit in a church service stressing about the emails you weren't answering.
The worst feeling.
You are convinced you simply aren't doing enough for your number one priority. You feel like you're failing the system, but the truth is, the system is failing you.
It is a fundamentally unwinnable game. It is rigged against human flourishing. And the clearest proof that this ranking system is flawed is that it inherently breaks down the moment real life gets complicated.
Because life is never just a neat little list.
Exactly. It only works on paper in a perfect vacuum. There's a deeply compelling scenario presented in our analysis that provides a concrete example of this. It explores the concept of priority overlaps.
Okay, let's look at that.
Imagine a situation where you have a sudden, severe family emergency. Say a close family member is unexpectedly hospitalized and you need to rush to be by their side.
Terrifying, but it happens.
Right. Now imagine this emergency happens at the exact same time as a scheduled mandatory church service or a deeply important time of religious observance.
Oh, wow.
If you were strictly operating on the cultural ranking model, where God is explicitly number one and family is explicitly number two, what does that system dictate that you do?
It dictates that you go to the church service and leave your family member alone in the hospital.
Yes.
Which is, frankly, absurd.
It is absurd.
And that is exactly how the system breaks. It forces you to make a terrible, impossible, and completely artificial choice. It demands that there be a winner and a loser between two things that any sensible theology says God actually commands you to care for. You shouldn't have to choose between honoring God and loving your family in a moment of acute crisis.
Right.
But the latter model, by its very rigid ordinal nature, tells you that you must choose.
Precisely. The system fails in the real world because it is built on a fundamental philosophical error. In logic and philosophy, this is known as a category error.
A category error.
Yes, a category error is a specific type of logical fallacy, where things belonging to one specific category are mistakenly presented as if they belong to an entirely different category. It's when you assign a property to something that simply cannot possess that property.
Let me see if I can explain this clearly, because understanding the category error is the key to dismantling this whole trap.
Go for it.
A classic philosophical example of a category error is asking someone, what does the color blue taste like?
Right.
Or how heavy is the number 4? It's a nonsensical question. You are taking a concept from the category of visual perception, color, and trying to force it into the category of gustatory perception, taste.
The brain just rejects it.
Exactly. It simply doesn't compute. So when we apply this to theology, ranking God alongside your Monday morning commute, your 401k investments, your reputation, or your weekend hobbies is a massive category error.
Yes.
Because you are taking the ultimate uncreated creator and forcing him into the exact same categorical system as finite created things.
That's an excellent breakdown. You cannot weigh the concept of infinity on a bathroom scale. It is a category error. And there is a brilliant analogy that really crystallizes this concept. We can look at this through the lens of a restaurant metaphor.
Oh, I love this metaphor. Let's really paint the picture here. I want you, listening right now, to imagine your absolute favorite restaurant. Picture the ambiance, the low lighting, the incredibly attentive service, the smell of the food coming out of the kitchen. Now, the ranking model we've been discussing treats God like he is simply the most delicious, most expensive item on the menu. He is the dry-aged prime steak.
Right.
And your career, well, that's a very nice side dish of truffle fries. Your hobbies are the dessert. Your gym routine is the appetizer. The whole goal of the priority system is to make sure you always order the steak first.
Yes.
But here is the massive theological correction. God does not want to be the best menu item in the restaurant, because he is not on the menu at all. He is the owner of the entire shop. It is such a vivid and accurate visualization. He holds the deed to the building. He hired the executive chef. He bought the tables you're sitting at.
Yeah.
To treat the owner of the establishment as if he's just another dish you can choose to consume or ignore is wildly inappropriate to who he is. Right. You don't walk into a restaurant, look at the waiter and say, I'll have the Caesar salad, the ribeye, and oh, I'll also take the deed to the real estate.
Exactly.
It's absurd. They exist in entirely different realms of reality.
And there is another powerful metaphor that expands on this same concept, dealing with the nature of lists themselves. The metaphor of the paper in the air.
Let's unpack that one.
We spend our lives meticulously crafting to-do lists. And we are told that to be good, faithful people, we need to treat God like a family. He is the very first line item written in bold ink at the top of our daily to-do list.
Always number one.
Right. But deep theology, specifically the ancient concept of YHWH, the name of God, which translates roughly to I am that I am, points to God as the ground of all being. This tells us that God shouldn't be a line item on the list at all. He is the paper that the list is written on.
Oh, that's good.
Even more than that, he's the air that you are pulling into your lungs that allows your heart to beat so that you are alive to even make the list in the first place.
That is so profound. You can't write oxygen as item number 4 on your to-do list.
Exactly.
It is the prerequisite for the list existing.
The biblical text uses the phrase the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He is the absolute foundation and the ultimate limit of the entire list. He is not competing with the mundane items on the page. He is the overarching reality that allows the page, the pen, and the writer to exist.
Okay, so we've established that the ladder is broken. We've established that ranking God is a category error that leads to a zero-sum game of endless guilt.
Right.
But what does this all mean for how human beings actually live their lives? Because the psychological tension of this zero-sum game, this constant frantic ranking and competing and feeling like you are failing,
Exhausting.
it's way too stressful for any normal human nervous system to handle long term. So humans do what humans naturally do when faced with unbearable cognitive dissonance. We adapt.
We find a workaround.
Exactly. We find a psychological coping mechanism. And our absolute favorite coping mechanism for dealing with this priority stress is compartmentalization.
Oh, big time.
To stop the stress, we aggressively separate our lives into isolated, hermetically sealed silos to keep the competing priorities from ever touching each other.
We do. It is a defense mechanism against the guilt we just talked about. And this phenomenon is widely recognized and detailed as the sacred versus secular split.
Let's dive into that.
To really understand how damaging this is, let's use the metaphor of a large wooden dresser cabinet. Imagine your entire life, all your different roles and responsibilities, is a large dresser with multiple drawers.
Okay, I can picture that.
To handle the overwhelming stress of the ranking system, people take God, take their faith, take their spirituality, and they place it securely in the sacred drawer. Typically, this is the top drawer.
The fancy drawer.
Exactly. It's lined with velvet. It's kept very neat. And they only open this specific drawer on Sunday mornings when they go to a worship service, or maybe for 20 minutes on a Wednesday morning when they're having their quiet time or doing early morning devotions.
Right.
During that designated time, they read, they pray, they engage deeply with the sacred. But the crucial part is what happens next. When that designated time is up, they firmly and securely push that drawer shut. And then Monday morning rolls around, the alarm goes off, and it is time to open the work drawer. Or maybe later in the week, they're doing their taxes, so they open the money drawer. On Friday night, they open the leisure drawer. And here is the absolute tragedy of this compartmentalization strategy. These so-called secular drawers are managed completely independently from the sacred drawer.
Completely disconnected.
When the work drawer is pulled open, the God drawer is slammed shut. The secular drawers are allowed to operate entirely free from the influence, the ethics, the values, or the presence of the sacred drawer.
Right. It creates a split personality. You act one way, use one vocabulary, and hold one set of ethics on Sunday morning, and you use a completely different, ruthless set of ethics in your Tuesday morning strategy meeting.
And we really need to pause and ask a critical question here. What does this long-term compartmentalization actually do to a person's faith over the span of a decade? What does it do to their soul?
It can't be good.
The consensus is incredibly clear. This disconnected, siloed life slowly ruins faith. It suffocates it.
Wow.
Because it makes belief feel entirely irrelevant during the Monday to Friday grind. And let's be honest, Monday through Friday are a person's most productive, most energy-intensive, and most challenging hours.
That's real life.
Exactly. If your concept of God is safely locked away in the Sunday drawer, then he essentially has absolutely nothing to say about your career ambitions, your financial anxieties, your investments, or your stress levels when dealing with a toxic boss.
It effectively makes you a practicing atheist for 80% of your waking life.
That is exactly what it does. And the believer is left deeply fatigued. They are constantly trying to balance two entirely disconnected worlds, living a fractured, split identity. They have their church self and their real-world self, and the two are never allowed to meet.
Okay, this has been a heavy but incredibly necessary deconstruction. We have completely demolished the latter.
You think God?
We've seen how ranking God creates this zero-sum game of guilt, and how that unbearable guilt leads directly to this exhausting, compartmentalized dresser drawer life. It's a broken system.
Yeah.
So the obvious question is, how do we fix it?
The alternative.
What is the alternative to the latter? If I'm listening to this and realizing my whole life is just a series of disconnected drawers, how do I integrate it? The concepts we are looking at introduce a massive, beautiful paradigm shift to solve this. They call it intimate sonship and the relational framework.
Yes. To counter this cold, compartmentalized logic and the rigid anxiety of the priority list, we have to look at the biblical theology of relationship, which introduces a profound shift in posture.
A shift in posture.
In the New Testament, God is revealed not just as a distant, unapproachable creator, and certainly not as a formal, demanding corporate dictator checking your time card. He is revealed using the word Abba.
Which is such a specific and important word.
It is. Abba is an intimate Aramaic term. It doesn't translate to a formal father in the rigid sense. It translates much closer to dad or papa. It is a term used by children, a term of deep endearment, familiarity, and absolute family belonging. And introducing this single word shifts the entire dynamic of the human-divine interaction.
It changes everything.
It moves it away from a distant, formal relationship governed by rigid rules and ordinal rankings and transforms it into an intimate relationship of belonging. It completely changes the paradigm from a duty-bound list to a vibrant, living connection.
The analogy that really brought this to life for me is the contrast between living in a house as a guest versus living in a house as a child.
That's a great one.
I think this perfectly captures the shift we are talking about. Think about the last time you were a guest in someone's home, especially someone you didn't know incredibly well, maybe a boss or a distant relative.
You're always on edge.
Always. Think about how you physically hold your body. You're stiff. You're tense. You sit on the very edge of the couch so you don't mess up the pillows. You are constantly hovering, constantly asking for permission for the smallest, most basic things.
Right. Can I use the restroom?
Is it okay if I use the restroom down the hall? Can I get a glass of tap water? Should I take my shoes off here or leave them on the porch? You are operating entirely out of a state of anxiety and fear of breaking their unwritten rules and offending the host. You're trying to figure out their priority list so you don't mess up.
That is the exact posture of someone living under the God is my #1 priority ranking system.
Yeah.
They are constantly tiptoeing around, terrified of making the wrong move.
Right.
Now, contrast that tense guest with a child of the owner of the house. A child feels entirely secure. They walk through the front door, drop their dirty backpack on the floor, walk straight into the kitchen, open the refrigerator, and grab a snack without asking anyone for permission.
They just live there.
They don't need a bulleted list of rules pinned to the wall because they organically, intrinsically understand the values of the household. They live naturally and freely within it. They know what pleases their father and what doesn't, not because they memorized a rigid priority list, but because of years of intimate, shared life.
I want to make sure we ground this in reality because it sounds beautiful, but how does it actually work?
Sure.
Let's put this sonship model into a real-world scenario. Imagine you are contemplating a major life-altering decision. Let's say you are thinking about completely switching careers. You have spent the last 10 years working a grueling job in construction, and you want to pivot into the tech industry. It's a huge risk.
Yeah.
How does navigating this decision look different if you are operating as a guest with a priority list versus if you are operating as a child in a relational framework?
That is the perfect test case to see the difference in action. Under a legalistic, ranked model, the guest mentality, you approach God with a spirit of deep fear and anxiety. You are essentially begging for a legalistic yes or no to clear your conscience. Your prayers sound like, God, am I allowed to take this tech job? Will the longer hours ruin my ability to keep you as my #1 priority? Will I be punished or fall out of favor if I make the wrong choice? It is entirely fear-based, trying to balance the zero-sum ledger.
It sounds exhausting just talking about it.
It is.
Yeah.
But under the sonship model, the child mentality, you don't beg for permission like a frightened guest. Instead, you engage in what is beautifully termed relational consultation.
Relational consultation. I love that term. It sounds like a partnership.
It changes everything about the interaction. You consult the Father not because you are terrified of breaking a rule, but because you deeply trust his overarching plan and his wisdom.
Right.
Your prayer changes. You say, Dad, I am looking at this tech job. It's a big leap. I want my new career, the way I treat my future coworkers, to honor our family's reputation. I want my work in this new field to reflect your values. How do we navigate this transition together?
That is such a healthier way to approach it.
It is fundamentally about aligning with values over following rules. It is about organizing your life around the heart of the Father, knowing that you are absolutely secure in his grace, even if you stumble or make a suboptimal career choice. It completely removes the paralyzing zero-sum pressure of the ranking model.
But hold on, if I can play devil's advocate for a second.
Please.
If we just say, hey, we are children, we don't have lists, we just live organically, doesn't that run the risk of just spiritualizing our ambition? Like, couldn't someone use this as an excuse to become a total workaholic, neglect their family, never pray, and just say, hey, I'm just living freely in the house, my 80-hour work week is fine?
Oh, definitely.
How do we keep this from just becoming an excuse to ignore the spiritual disciplines?
That is a brilliant pushback, and it leads exactly to the theological safeguard against that kind of chaos. The answer lies in how this relational theology ties directly into one of the most famous and perhaps most misunderstood passages in the New Testament, Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2.
Okay, yes.
This text introduces the concept of the living sacrifice, and this concept is the ultimate bridge between deep spirituality and everyday mundane life.
Let's unpack Romans 12 because I know this is the theological engine that drives this entire paradigm shift.
Romans 12 calls believers to present their body as a living sacrifice. The original Greek phrase used by the Apostle Paul is kousiazousa. Now, to understand how radical this is, we have to look at the historical context.
Right.
In the ancient world, across almost all cultures, including the Old Testament system, sacrifices were by definition dead.
Right. It was a very bloody, very final event. You brought an animal to an altar, it was killed, its blood was shed, the priest did his duty, and the ritual was over. You went home. It was a confined, scheduled event in a specific location.
Exactly. It was an event locked in the sacred drawer. But Paul introduces this oxymoron, a thusiazousa, a breathing offering. It is a sacrifice that is alive, moving, and walking around in the dirt and grime of the real world.
Which completely shatters the dresser drawer metaphor we talked about earlier.
Yes.
Because if you are a breathing, living offering, it means your active presence in the world is the worship. It means that while you are sitting in a cubicle writing thousands of lines of code, or while you are exhausted at the kitchen table managing a complex financial budget spreadsheet, or while you are simply patiently loving your spouse after you both had a long, terrible day, that action itself is an integrated act of worship.
Precisely. The altar is no longer just the church building. The altar is your office, your living room, your commute.
There is no such thing as unsacred space anymore. You aren't closing the God drawer so you can open the work drawer. The God drawer has been dismantled, and the divine presence permeates the entire cabinet. You are working with God, not instead of Him.
This is the pinnacle of total self-integration. The concept of the living sacrifice means the absolute end of compartmentalization. But Paul doesn't stop there. Romans 12 goes on to say that this integration happens through the renewing of your mind.
It's the renewing of your mind.
And the ultimate proof that your mind has actually been renewed, that you have truly abandoned the stressful worldly ranking system we've been deconstructing, is a complete and total change in your internal dialogue. The literal questions you ask yourself in the quiet, anxious moments of decision-making fundamentally change.
So you stop waking up in a cold sweat, asking the worldly ranking question. You stop stressing, is God my number one priority today? Did I give Him exactly 15% more time than I gave my job? Am I failing the list?
Right. You abandon that math entirely. Instead, you begin asking the integrated question, which we can call the lordship question. Does this decision I am about to make in my work, or the way I am speaking to my family, or how I am spending my finances, reflect the lordship and the character of Christ over my whole life?
It's a completely different framework.
You completely stop trying to balance God against the other demands of your life, and you start living your entire life inside the overarching reality of God.
Wow. Okay, let's bring this all the way home. Let's deconstruct the ladder one last time and pull all of these threads together for you, the listener, because we've covered a massive amount of philosophical and theological ground today.
We really have.
If you take one core paradigm shift away from this deep dive, let it be this. The ladder system you were taught is broken. The language of making God your number one priority sounds incredibly spiritual, it sounds noble, but it is a trap.
A total trap.
Ranking God creates a zero-sum game of constant, exhausting competition between the things you love. It creates a never-ending cycle of guilt because, mathematically, you will never have enough time to satisfy the list. It creates a fragmented, compartmentalized dresser drawer life where your faith is locked in a velvet-lined Sunday drawer while your real, messy life happens on Monday without any spiritual guidance. The latter simply cannot and will not create true, lasting balance in your life.
And if we connect this all back to the bigger picture, to the ultimate reality of who God is, we see that we don't actually need a number one priority. What the human soul actually needs is a sovereign center.
A sovereign center.
We don't need God to be the best, most expensive item on the menu. We need Him to be the owner of the restaurant. We need God to be the entirety of the reality we operate within. When God ceases to be an item on a list and becomes the everything, the exhausting conflict between your priorities simply evaporates.
Yeah.
Your work, your family, your money, your hobbies, they stop being rivals competing against your faith. Instead, they become the very specific, tangible places where your faith is actually lived out in a continuous relational fellowship with the Father.
This has been such a massive, necessary paradigm shift. I feel like my own brain is rewiring as we talk through this. But I know exactly what you are thinking right now listening to this. You're thinking, okay, I am sold. I've smashed the ladder. The ladder is officially firewood. But
Hmm.
what on earth do I build in its place? I still have a mortgage. I still have a boss. I still have kids. How do I actually structure my chaotic Tuesday if I don't have a priority list to guide me?
That is the perfect question to ask right now.
And that is exactly what we're going to tackle next time. This was the deconstruction. Next time is the reconstruction. In our next deep dive, we are going to explore the practical solutions. We will show you how the hub and spokes metaphor and the whole cabinet framework completely eliminate the toxic competition between your life categories. We are going to look at how every single square inch of your life can move in peaceful, unified harmony. You absolutely won't want to miss it.
To close our time together today, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought. Something for you to deeply mull over as you go back to your day, your commute, your work, and your family.
Let's hear it.
Consider the metaphor of God, not as an object in a room, but as the light in that room. I want you to think about the specific areas of your life that feel the most chaotic, the most stressful, or the most out of balance right now. Maybe it's your career, maybe it's a relationship. What if the solution to that stress isn't to frantically rearrange the furniture of your priorities, trying to find the perfect magically balanced configuration? What if the real issue this whole time is simply that you've been trying to organize the room with the lights turned off?